Good morning, and thank you for having both Quality Associates, a Konica Minolta company, involved in this discussion this morning. As Troy mentioned, we've been involved with FCW for quite some time and reporting out on where private sector and our type of service offerings around digital transformation fit into this undertaking that all of these agencies are currently either exploring or are completely underway with a plan and a process. And so we're seeing a variation of a lot of things. I know when I look back when we first got involved with FCW, and I think about what we were doing for this initiative, quite a bit different than what we're doing today. So I actually chose this topic because it's really the most popular topic within our organization right now in terms of the number of calls that are coming in and the alignment to what the requirements are within those conversations. A lot of agencies reach out to us. They want to know, what everybody else is doing. And, unfortunately, as mentioned by Lawrence too, with the different size of the agencies and the different funding sources, everybody's doing something a little bit different. And so I'm going to just kind of make an effort to cover some of what folks are doing today. People are certainly outsourcing work. They're insourcing work. They're doing it on site. They're doing it off site. So it's really just a combination of quite a number of things. So first of all, I want to just to cover this idea of high quality, high production conversion processes, and the idea of being able to perform in an environment to produce high volume data, and the ability to accession and classify at the same time is a difficult task. And so one of the things I want to point out is this is not just a technology play. And in fact, to the contrary, I think to the left side of my screen, I talk about the type of professionals from our teams that get involved with managing these type of expectations. You'll see from that list, this is a lot of area of expertise. Not only do the IT folks, get involved with us, but the process engineers, the developers, all of the operators that are on a day-to-day basis working through, the material and getting it digitized, the supervisors, the folks reporting up, people that are responsible for facilities, maintenance, ultimately the trainers so that we can scale this staff. There's quite a bit that goes into it from that side. The other thing I'll point out that we feel is a key success criteria is having an overall plan. Some of the engagements that we've had thus far have been just that, right? The agencies wanted to figure out what their plan would consist of. And I've kind of laid out for you, in the right side here, what some of those things are, right? So obviously communication's key. Lawrence touched on, overall expense. There's fixed costs, there's ongoing costs, the staffing effort, which sort of relates to, the left side of my screen and who all of those folks are. This selection process around hardware and software, and there was a mention of cognitive technology and the role that it might play. How do we get, IT involved to manage where this content's going? How do we get facility folks involved? How do we ensure that the work that's coming in is accountable by the organization or by the agency? And that's where I'm touching on the inventory and the manifest controls and so forth. And then ultimately transportation. So if the material that we're talking about, and I'm really referring to mostly analog records, is moving from one location to the next, how do we do that? And so all of that is covered in what we develop in these overall plans. So let's talk a little bit about where to get started. I think there was mention earlier about one of the key things that we see as being part of the success criteria, and that's stakeholder endorsement. Getting the executives, the business side, the technical folks, and ultimately the institutional knowledge of the records managers has been really key. We've seen some really great committees get formed within these agencies. Sometimes they're folks that are just an internal committee by the agency itself, and then in other cases, we're playing a role within that group. And I'm finding that the developing of the stakeholder endorsement along with the committee has been extremely valuable for the agencies that are undertaking these very large projects. And they don't necessarily have to be large. Some of them are smaller but very complex. And so we're seeing quite a bit of that. Thorough assessments. Most agencies look into this and sort of want to determine straight away how much of these permanent records do we still have, and where are they located? What is their meaningful nature to us? And so there's quite a bit of work going into the assessment process as well. Determining whether work can be done on site or off site. And then I'll jump over to my last box there, and sort of 5 key criteria: volume, time, space, IT, and staff. These are all things that are critical to the success of these programs and projects. So this is what a day in the life of a QAI consultant looks like. We get brought into what we like to refer to as an agency's most important asset, and that's information and content. Now, unfortunately, we're oftentimes brought to the basement of these buildings, and so this is what we see. Where there's large volumes of paper, there's oftentimes a history of a microfilm fiche sort of transition at some point, but this is what we get involved with. And the thing that I want to just share with you as a takeaway, that's a kind of obvious statement, but this is where the real work gets involved, is nobody managing these records at any point said, there's this thing M-19 that's going to come around eventually. And so therefore we need to manage all of this content as if we're going to digitize it someday. That is not the case. And so one of the major efforts obviously is to figure out what process that we're going to use to be effective, efficient, and accurate at the conversion of these records. I want to point out too, we've been doing this for a very long time, and there are certain obvious challenges that come up, and I'll mention what a few of those are. A lot of organizations, I think, are always will underestimate the level of effort, particularly around the preparation. So when you saw my earlier slide, those materials have to get into these devices to become digitized. What's the level of effort to do that? How are we going to go about establishing, whether it's through cognitive technology or it's manual, the ability to classify and accession these records? And so that's a big challenge that does occur with a lot of these projects that we're involved in. Not going to go through all these because I know I'm a little bit short on time. So thoroughly defining the requirements. Once again, these are not the kind of projects you want to go in and get involved in without having a very clear understanding. I mentioned earlier, the knowledge force that gets developed in these type of projects. Everybody has to know their role, and defining of the requirements certainly allows us to make sure that IT is in touch with their set of requirements, along with the records folks and the project management folks and people that are reporting up back to their customer. It's incredibly critical that everybody be in the same spot. Regular communication, you'll see in my last box over there, sometimes taken for granted. Communication in the past is a bit different than communication today, and in terms of how we serve up information and reports. A lot of what we do currently is done, in these virtual settings, whereas before quite a bit of it was being done face to face. So, what's lost, right, in that alternative, and those are things I think to identify as well. The mention of cognitive technology, intelligent capture. How good are the tools? What's the reliability of things like artificial intelligence and robotic processing? How good are the capture devices and the softwares and so forth that are dealing in structured and semi-structured and complex structures of forms and so forth? The answer is they're quite good. In fact, they're surprisingly good. And when do you put some of these things in place is a question that we oftentimes evaluate, and it falls largely on the process engineers to make a determination of that. So we do see the use of cognitive technology in a lot of what we do. We deploy it quite regularly. And the idea, again, behind it is, to pick up speed, to accelerate our process, and to reduce the cost associated with many of the manual processes that we've had in the past. your plan will result at some point in a process. And so my diagram that I'm sharing with you here is what one of those might look like. There's people that are involved typically at each of these stages. This is the kind of thing, again, that, once you've gone through a pilot process and once you're moving closer to your prod plan and what these ultimate, deliverables are intended to look like, this is the kind of diagramming that we would create for the customer to understand what those expectations look like. There's a project workflow that's also part of the success criteria. Initiation, planning, production, reporting, and closure are all very key parts to getting this right. It's important that we develop, statements of work, that we define, levels of effort, that we are going through a series of different pilots to vet out what all this variability, may look like within the scope of the project. How much of this is going to be, streamlined and then therefore how much of it is going to be exception work. All these things pop up in these type of projects, regardless of the size. The reporting component, again, also very important. Meeting weekly and monitoring schedules, for purposes of throughput and cost control and sharing with the customer exactly where we are is incredibly important to becoming successful and ensuring that we can do what we say we want to do. So I want to just quickly touch on a few of the other key variables. I mentioned the role of a pilot process. I don't know a project that we do today that doesn't involve a pilot program. Some are very complex, whereas others are quite straightforward. So getting back to, critical success factors, this certainly would be one. And its obvious placement in our engagement is to have this occur prior to going into production. There's a lot of talk about, devices in market right now. This understanding of FADGI, right? And is it a process? Is it something the scanner, provides to us? This is falling in line with where NARA is describing their guidelines for the what you can submit. FADGI is certainly on the radar of most all hardware manufacturers today. Some of them are much further along than others. But irregardless, whether they're wide format devices, book scanners, high-speed scanners, most of the manufacturers in the market today are looking to solve for how to become, FADGI 3-star compliant. I want to talk real quickly as well about another area of risk. Physical facility security is important for its obvious reasons, but it's also expensive to put into place, and there's quite a bit of work that goes into ensuring that these security variables exist within the facilities that are processing, in most cases, fairly sensitive information. So it's not just the physical. It can also be obviously with staff. And so I've laid out a couple bullets underneath that talk specifically around, intrusion detection, having surveillance devices and secure card technology for entry. What is the nature of the work that we're doing? Is it top secret? Is it classified? Is it just secret? These are all things obviously that are going to play a role, not only in the conditions of the facility, but also with the staff and their clearance processes to be able to work on this type of project. The transportation and chain of custody, again, another little bit of an obvious area, but how tight is it, right? Where are these materials when they're going into these environments for digitization? At what point can we, request that information? Is it in production and it's capable of, being discovered in the production process? Can we call it back? If we need it, do we have to wait until the production process is complete? How secure is the transportation, right? How reliable are the vehicles? Are they doing single stop runs and so forth, is some of our other areas of concern and consideration. So this is my last slide. So success. When all of this is done and done very well, and it's, again, all about the mapping and the documenting of the process initially before we get into any of what you see in any of these illustrations. But a well-oiled machine operates efficiently and effectively every single day without risk to cost, productivity, and security. That's the goal, right? So I recognize that not all agencies are funded to the extent that they can leverage an organization like Konica Minolta to do this work on their behalf. But we are, available to talk about the plan, and we are available to talk about the process. And all of that, again, is coming from what we've learned over the years and the best practices that have been developed as a result of doing this kind of work at the levels that we do. So, Troy, I want to say thank you for once again having us involved. I know we've been on this track with you guys for the better almost 2 years now. And it's great to see things evolving. Like I said, the popularity and the number of phone calls that we're getting from various agencies to want to know more about the how, which is really the spot we consider ourselves, is sort of overwhelming at this point. But it's good to see the activity. It's good to see that people, even with the pandemic and working remotely, are considering this topic top of mind to their agency and organization. And we're certainly seeing that from our end. So thank you for having us involved, and thank you for allowing us to be a sponsor.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate that, and I agree. It's the surge in work is a good problem to have on this. Couple quick questions, if we can here, and these are more your Scott's take rather than definitive answers, I think. But there was a kind of fundamental question that was posed by an audience member of, shouldn't the first question be, do we need to digitize these records? And I know that there are, provisions for exceptions in the requirements, but what about the argument that there are certain things that should just live out their retention period versus investing the time and money to scan and maintain?
Well, I guess I would share with you that, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, we are seeing the organizations that are considering the digitization of this material. There are quite a number of agencies who are very anxious for NARA and their federal record centers to be fully operational, because their plans and intentions are to deliver, their analog records to their facilities. So that is part of their plan. They don't intend to undertake the digitization effort. So there's just so many spins and so many different ways, I think, at accomplishing the goal and the target. I think that, the other thing is we are also, in addition to servicing and attempting to comply with where NARA is going, a lot of these agencies as well are keeping copies of this digital content in their own agency for purposes of retrieval and so forth. So I guess the script in terms of what makes sense really it first needs to be evaluated as to what are the requirements of the information, and who needs access to that. And not that they're not accessible that once they're at NARA, but what does the scope, right, of that business requirement look like? And then we can kind of further define on the how we're going to go about it.
Very good. And then a question that really comes to the sort of communications and change management part of it, which you spoke to in a couple points in your presentation. Another audience member was asking about, as a facility records officer for a large government agency, what's the best way to reach all employees to start scanning and digitizing their records instead of boxing up paper and putting it in storage? So I guess it's getting people on board is the short version of that question.
Yeah, I think that goes back to my slide, 2 or 3, which, is a plan. And I also spoke about the existence of a committee. The committee and its representation should be folks from, the records departments. They're going to be managing the expectations of the agency. The plan should define their role and what to do. I'm not sure if the question was around what platform's most useful to do that on, but Zoom or Teams or Google. I mean, we're seeing everything, right, from a platform communication perspective. But I think the existence of the plan and the who's involved in that and doing group discussions and then probably having breakout discussions that further define what folks are expected to be doing.
Very good. Well, and speaking of breakout discussions, we're going to have to leave it there for time, but I hope you can stick around. And I know if you have a chance to pop into the chat room, there are a couple specific questions people are asking that may be better answered there. But Scott, always a pleasure to talk to you, and thanks for being part of today's event.
Yeah, thanks, Troy. Appreciate it.